today. He has some issues going on at home, and so I texted him back and said, well, you can catch it when it comes to a theater near you. So he texted back and went, maybe I made his day a little bit better. I guess, no, not everybody here was here last time, right? Just in the middle there. But you weren't either, that's right. Okay. So we'll do a little review and then we'll jump into finishing up this week. So go to the next slide. Number 3. We got to jump around here for a little bit. The purpose of the presentation. What we're here to do is talk about intelligent design and intelligent designer and the science and what we know from nature and the universe that we've learned in your lifetime. There are no young people here. Maybe Tara, but I know the guy she's with isn't. So, and the rest of you, you haven't been young for a long time, right? Anyway, in our lifetimes, we have learned a lot and learned a whole bunch about the universe, cosmos, the earth, and biology. That now you have to be very creative. And I said last time, almost as creative as one of our political parties in finding evidence to convict the other political parties. You got to be creative to continue to deny the existence of an intelligent designer. And last session, we did not get into who that designer is, and we will this time and kind of finish it up. But the purpose is to show that the entire cosmos, the Earth's physical laws, and biologies all have the hallmarks of a supernatural intelligence and purpose, which is important, supernatural power and capabilities that support the existence of design. And anytime you see design, you know there's been a designer. If you're walking along Fort Myers Beach and you see a sandcastle or sculpture about this high, you don't think that the waves and the wind blew the sand into that design. Say it's a porpoise or a turtle or something. You know that there was somebody who designed that. And that's true of everything we know. There are no situations in real life where if you see something that's got any order or looks like it has any purpose without a designer. You have to have a designer. And that's what we're basically doing last time, and this time is pointing out all of the evidences of design, and you come to the inevitable conclusion that there's been a designer. To conclude otherwise has the probability of 0. The last time we talked about some chances of things being the way they are, and it's 1 over 10 to the 120th power. That's 1 divided by 10 with 120 zeros, which is a number that's so small it's incomprehensible. And we went through all that. And there's 200 such, we call them constants or the laws of physics or space-time theorems. There's over 200 that have been discovered that describe in mathematical terms how matter and energy behave and how they relate to one another. All of them have precision out to 40, 50, 60, 100 decimals. All of them. All 200 of them. I think it was in 1986 that we knew of 2 such constants. Now there's 200. So in the last 36 years, our knowledge and our ability to model real life and how matter and energy works in mathematical formulas has exploded. And we went through all that. We went through how the sun, galaxies We're in a spiral galaxy. Spiral galaxies can't last more than a couple billion years because as they spin, they collapse. Well, we've got 5% of the billions of galaxies are still spiraling. They can't be 13 billion years old and still be spirals. And there's a whole bunch of things like that. We came down to just getting the Earth where it is and the Moon where it is and the planets where they are and the type of planets was 1/10 to the 100th power. And then you get to the chance that all 200 of these constants or formulas all have to be exactly what they are. You got another probability of 1 divided by 10 to the 100-something power. So you add those together, and it's just incomprehensible that everything got the way it is cosmologically, and then all of these physical parameters are exactly what they need to be. And by exact, I mean one of the descriptions that was given me, if you stretched a tape measure from one end of the universe to the other, which is 94 billion light years, and it was marked off in inches, and you took like the constant for gravity and found what it precisely is on that tape measure, and you move that factor an inch in relationship to the entire tape measure, we would not have a universe. We'd either have too much gravity, the thing would have collapsed into a molten ball. We'd have too little gravity, and the galaxies, the planets, and everything else would not have formed by gravity gathering all this stuff together. Just 1 inch out of a light year, I think, is 6 trillion miles, so you multiply that by 94 billion, and then divide that up into feet and inches, and you get that many inches. And if you move the pointer from what it is 1 inch in either direction, and nothing happens. I just can't imagine that kind of precision. But that's the precision that we're dealing with 200 parameters that describe how matter and energy go together. And we went through all that 2 weeks ago. And if that isn't the pre-ultimate evidence of design, you're taking something that you shouldn't be taking. Or something. I mean, it's just impossible, statistically impossible, for just a few of those things to get the Earth where it is like it is with the tilt, with the moon spinning once a day. I mean, there's just all kinds of things. And there's other ones I didn't even mention. There's whole things about the ice, how much ice we have. And there was time when we didn't have ice, and the place was too hot, and humanity wouldn't have existed. The ice is a moderating thing because it reflects heat energy back into space, and if we don't have enough ice, the Earth warms up. We have too much ice, we go to an ice age. We've had, 5 or 6 ice ages over the supposed 13 billion years of existence. And again, I'm not trying to say it's 13 billion years or 6,000, or we're not getting into that at all, because there's good Christians on both sides of that. But however old it is and however many ice ages we've had, mankind could not show up until all that was cleared out. And the other real interesting thing from 2 weeks ago is we are living in a blink of an eye as far as the total time that the Earth is supposed to have been here. And if we were a little bit earlier, life would not, the conditions would not support humanity. And in a couple of thousand years, it won't support humanity again. There's all kinds of things in cycles that are in operation over 40,000 years, 60,000 years, 100,000 years. There's grand cycles going on that are going to kind of converge. Plus, the magnetic field is weakening, has been doing so for a long time. When that gets weak enough, the solar radiation will grow and intensify, and instead of having northern lights, we'll have solar radiation coming straight into the planet everywhere, which will tend to fry most life forms except for the cockroach, of course. That's going to be the last living thing on the planet Earth. Plus, the moon is moving away. Have you ever noticed that? It's further away than when you were born. Anybody notice that? It moves 2 inches a year. Precisely. And as it moves away, the Earth will wobble. Right now we're at a 23-degree incline. Well, that's going to start wobbling. It wobbles about 2 degrees over thousands of years now. That's one of these cycles. Without the gravitational pull of the moon, we're going to start wobbling up to 15 degrees. Well, that's going to wreck the climate. It's going to be too hot, too cold. Plus, as it moves away, the rotation of the Earth will slow down, and our days will be a month. It'll take a month to do a complete rotation. So if you're on the wrong side of that, it's going to be dark for a month, and it's going to be light for a month. Just like the moon. Right now, the moon rotates around the Earth and revolves exactly so that we have the same half of the moon facing us all the time. The Earth will get to that point if we wait long enough that we will go around the sun and rotate exactly the same. And we'll be like the moon is versus the Earth. The Earth will be that way versus the sun. Now, you can pick which side you want to be on, the dark side or the light side, or maybe that 2 feet where you got that transition time. But all these things are going on, and human life could not have existed 10,000 years ago and will not be able to exist 4,000 or 5,000 years in the future. We are in a window of time that is absolutely perfect. Is anybody surprised? Nah. So, anyway, move to the next one.
Is this the next one, honey, or do I move down?
5.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, we're going to do 4 areas. We've done 2 areas. We're going to do 2 more. We did the cosmos. We did the physical laws. Today we're going to do biology. Does anybody like biology? Oh. It's too bad Leslie Harmon here because he teaches it. Anyway, some really incredible things. I've got some neat pictures. If you're mechanical, you're going to enjoy this. And then finally, we're going to finish up with philosophical, which is not evidence, but it's argumentative, it's apologetic, it's thinking philosophically and putting all this together to come to the conclusion. We have been designed, and the designer is Yahweh. Okay? Now, this is just reviewing something I already said. Getting us to where we are is 1 divided by 10 with 173 zeros. Can anybody picture that number? You have to go from here to law of zeros. And it's precise out to that length. And if you change that last number, things fall apart. Next one. The more we learn about the universe, as I said, in 1986 we had 2 constants that we knew were highly precise. Now there's 200 of them. The more evident it becomes that there is a highly intelligent designer. And again, this was early in the presentation 2 weeks ago, and we were just kind of getting used to the idea of a designer. And that reminded me of some scripture. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power, divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what we see, from the real world, from the cosmos, and from how we've learned how it works, so that people are without excuse. And that matches what we're going through perfectly. It's what we have seen, what we've been able to learn. The other thing about this window we are in precisely the right time to be able to see what we think is 13 billion years back in time. That's where they get the Hubble Space Telescope and all that. So we can see the beginnings of the universe. There's something called cosmological background microwave radiation. And outer space has some heat left in it. Everywhere the Hubble look, there's evidences of a very minor amount of heat. Little, but there's still heat there, and they conclude from that's the heat left over from the initial conditions when the universe started. We call it the Big Bang for better words, but there's heat left over everywhere we look. There's heat. Now there's areas where it's a little warmer, and we're talking. Does anybody know what Kelvin temperature is? 0 Kelvin is like minus 73 degrees Celsius. Even more than that, I forget. Does anybody know what the Kelvin scale is? 283? Oh, that's pretty close. Anyway, and this background is like 1 or 2 degrees Kelvin. So it's really cold in centigrade and even colder in Fahrenheit. And the warm spots aren't a degree warmer. And our telescopes can, and other non-optical scopes can detect that, and we can see patterns that now are where galaxies are. Where you see patterns of warmer area. It looks like a big webbing when you see a picture. But anyway, if we were 10,000 years ago, we wouldn't see that as clearly as we do now. For 10,000 years in the future, that light would have already gone past the Earth because it's been traveling for however far it's been traveling, that radiation, and it got to us now and we can see it. But that light, the source of that light is gone. It's been gone a long time. So if we were just a little bit back in time, it would not have gotten to us. If we were ahead of time, it would have already passed us before we figured out how to look for it. Does that make sense? Because light travels. So that's another area where this window of time we're in allows us to discover and understand all of this stuff. Nice coincidence. Okay. These are the characteristics that we concluded last time, and we'll go into this some more of this at the end of this one. What is the characteristics of this intelligent designer? Well, you can't design something if you're in it. If there was nothing and you design it, you can't be in the design you just designed. You have to be outside the design. A bumper cannot design a car because it's part of the car. Does that make sense? Anyway, it has to be timeless because space and time has a beginning. All science believes that. That's why they call it the Big Bang. There is a 0 time and a 0 space, matter, and energy. So if there's 0 time and something outside of the universe, some intelligent designer designed this, he had to design it from outside of time. So that means eternal. Okay? Above and beyond matter and energy, because matter and energy are part of the universe. So the designer has to transcend matter and energy and has to be able to create it and control it. And finally, has to exist in multiple time frames. Now, we only know one time frame. But if you created one, you can create a whole bunch more. So, the Bible says something about 1,000 years in a day. Does everybody know that? So, time is, there are no clocks in heaven. Because a clock has to measure something that is very precisely cyclical. Well, there's nothing in heaven that does that. So, there are no clocks in heaven. And finally, and this is the big one, that gets us from a designer, which is a deity, generic little d deity, to a theistic designer with a capital G God. And that is that everything that we see, everything we learn, everything we've ever discovered, points to everything was done for the arrival of mankind. I had a slide last time from a famous atheistic astronomer who said, it's as if the universe knew we were coming. Like I said, if we were early, wouldn't survive. A little later, we're not going to survive. And there'd be no universe if any of these 200 parameters were just a little bit different. Yes?
Don't mind me just inputting here that there are philosophical arguments for every one of those bullet points that you have up.
We're going to get those.
Yeah.
I hope. There might be some I don't catch. And then, okay? All right. So all of that intentionality concludes, and more than implies, points to the fact that the creation was personal. And it was for the express existence and thriving and intellectual, spiritual, physical, mechanical civilization development of mankind, specifically. Now that's where a lot of scientists who are getting comfortable with the idea of intelligent design fall out of bed. They go off the deep end. And a lot of them won't approach intelligent design because they know it leads here. And therefore they reject anything that is not materialism based. There are huge scientific societies that say we will only consider things, theories, and research papers and experiments and anything else that is materialistic based. Like Carl Sagan said, the universe is all there ever was, will be, was, is, and will be. It's all matter and energy. And if you come up with something different, they're just not going to print it. Period. Okay. Now, is that where we are? Yes. So now we go through all that. That just cost you a half hour. Well, some people are new, you know. So you got to do it. Plus, the rest of you forgot what I said 2 weeks ago, right? Okay. Now we're going to get into all that. We're done with all that cosmic stuff. We've made the conclusion there is design. There's not only design, there's very specific, incredibly precise design that is beyond anything we could ever approach, and that designer was personal. There was a purpose and intentionality specifically for mankind. Now we're going to get into how special is this body that you're sitting here in. Is there intelligent design in it? And of course you can look at eyes and ears and the blood system and nervous system and all that kind of stuff. And it's just amazing how complex it is. But we're going to get down to the cellular level. And I'm going to show you some things that really blew my mind. Has anybody seen a cell? A cell? Ever seen a picture of a cell on TV? Okay. Well, pretend a cell is this room. And now we're inside a cell. So we just blew the scale up. So when you see a little cell through an electron microscope, shrink yourself down so now that you're inside the cell and you relate to the cell about like we do to the room, approximately. There are hundreds of things, elements in this cell. A lot of them we don't have a clue how they work. We don't have a clue how they got there, scientifically. And there are hundreds of things going on inside the cell. They are not like factories, they are factories. In fact, if we'd have known what a cell looked like before Henry Ford created the first assembly line, he'd have copied the cell. Okay? The cell has walls. Everybody knows that. Well, a factory has walls. Okay? A cell has entry points where raw materials come into the cell, and not only for the products, the proteins that are made and created in the cell, but also to make energy to get the cell going. Well, factories have doors in which the trucks back up and unload raw materials, and they have lines coming in to bring in power, and they have pipes going out to take away waste, or they have trucks take it out. The cell has the exact same thing. A factory has a guard or quality control so that the stuff coming in is what they want it to be. And it's of the quality that will make the product they want to make. Well, the cell does the same thing. It has little things that inspect what's coming into the cell through these prescribed, I don't want to say holes, but there's areas where this stuff can come through the membrane of the cell wall. And it is inspected, and if it ain't what it's supposed to be, it's kicked out. And excess stuff or byproducts or waste that the cell doesn't need after it's done what it's supposed to do is ejected out of the cell through specific places. Okay? All factories have ways of moving raw material and work in process and finished goods through the factory. We've got overhead cranes, we've got conveyor belts, we've got forklift trucks, we've got all kinds of stuff, right? Anybody been in a factory? Know what I'm talking about? The cell has the same thing. And I'm going to show you one in just a little bit. It's got conveyor belts that when the cell knows it's got to move a protein from here to there, it first creates a conveyor belt from product that's already in the cell. And then it's got a little foot truck, and I'll show you one of them, they're just so cool, that latches onto that protein and carries it over there. And as soon as it gets there, that conveyor belt disappears. Because things are going all over the place in the cell. And if they left these conveyor belts up, the cell would get so rigid you couldn't function. There'd be thousands of these little conveyor belts, and sooner or later, you'd have nothing but conveyor belts. So they have to disappear. So it uses chemicals to create this conveyor belt, and this little transportation device carries the protein along to where it needs to go, and that protein does what it's supposed to do in whatever area of the cell it's in. So it's really cool. And there's maybe hundreds, I don't know how many different little things there are in the cell. And there's the nucleus of the cell where a lot of stuff is made, and then it goes out of the nucleus, and then the cell, we still don't know. I've been studying the cell for 100 years. They finally figured out it wasn't just a lump of protoplasm. And we've been studying it for 100 years easily, and we still don't have a clue. I mean, there's things go on where they don't have a clue how it happens, or where the stuff comes from, or how come when it's done it just disappears. We don't know. Okay. We're going to give you an example on the next slide. This is a bacterium flagellum. The bacterium is the little round thing, and that's a cell. It's a one-cell thing. Okay? And that little whip on it is called the flagellum. And it's a propulsion mechanism. That flagellum spins and wobbles and moves the bacteria along in the liquid wherever it happens to be, whether it's pond scum or, a little drop of water or whatever. This, I hope you can see, is a schematic of that little whip. And if you've ever taken apart an electric motor, you will recognize there's the exact same parts of the motor. That brown collar around the bottom is like the stator that the shaft magnets spin in. It's got a shaft, it's got bushings, it's got gaskets and grommets so the stuff doesn't, because this sticks outside the cell wall. That top part there, before the big elbow, is the cell wall. So it's got to keep stuff from going out the cell wall. So it's got all of the parts, it's got a shaft, and then it's got a joint on the shaft, and then that yellow thing looks like a part cup. That's the actual flagellum. If we'd seen that before, whoever developed the electric motor, he'd use that instead of however long it took him to figure out how to do an electric motor. Because it works exactly like, and has the exact same parts as it's not like an electric motor. It is an electric motor is like it, because it certainly predated the electric motor. Now the interesting thing about this that blew my mind, this rotates at 100,000 RPM. Now, Formula One engines that scream, and if you've ever seen a Formula One, they whine and they hurt your ears. That's like 15,000, 16,000 RPM. This is 100. There's nothing on earth that spins that fast. But that's not all. It can reverse and go 100,000 RPM in the other direction in a quarter of a turn. So it's spinning this way at 100,000 RPM in a quarter of a turn. It can be going the other way at 100,000 RPM. That's a heck of a motor in itself. That's a beast. What? Elon Musk? Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing. And these kind of things are all over. We've got like, I think, 3 trillion cells in our body, and they don't have these little whips sticking out of them, but they all have stuff like this going on that has been designed. And what we'll get into, and a recurring theme is irreducible, which means you cannot reduce it, complexity. There's about 30-some parts to that. None of those parts show up anywhere else in the universe, in life, anywhere else. None of them. So you got to have all 30 of those pieces at the same time to come together in exactly the right assembly for that to work. And they don't exist anywhere else, in any other life form, any other cell, any other thing with a tail on it. Even other things that have the tail have a different one. Would you call that design? That's not a coincidence. So this is a very unique little thing, and it's designed beyond the ability of mankind to design something like it. There's no way, and it's like 90-some% energy efficient. Of the energy it gets, it uses, I think, 96-7%. That's incredible. What's a gasoline engine? 30, 25? You might know, right, Lee? Okay. It's real low. It's a third or less. The rest of it goes out in heat. That's why your engine gets hot, because it didn't use the energy to turn your wheels. This is 97% efficient. There is no heat that's let off this concern. Okay? So that's how special cellular structures are. Now we'll go to another one. This is called the microtubule. And this is the conveyor belt. It's actually a tube. You can see it's got little pieces to it. Looks like a corn cob in the middle of it. And all of those little colored things come together from other parts of the cell and create this transportation path from point A to point B. And then these things break apart and go back to where they came from. Again, their size compared to the total part of the cell is they're like probably a softball sitting here versus this room. We're on an incredibly small scale, but within that scale, things are huge. I mean, there's huge differences between sizes. Okay? So this is called microtubule. And I don't think anybody wants to really read that. We go to this. Now you got the microtubule, and you got this thing called the kinesin. And the blue thing on top is the protein. The kinesin is the thing between the microtubule, that corncob looking thing, and the blue thing on top. Now you notice it's got two little things like this. Well, those are stickies. And it sticks on to the protein. Just like if you put glue on your hands and then stuck it onto a beach ball, you'd have the beach ball. And that's exactly what happens here. Then you got the little vertical part, which is almost nothing, and you got two little feet. And if the vertical part's this big, relationally, the legs are about that long. Because with an electron microscope, we can see them moving. And what happened is the feet just flop along and it walks down this microtubule, carrying the protein from wherever the protein was created to wherever it's needed. Now, if that isn't just like a factory, I don't know what it is. And these things are so funny to see them, because you can go on YouTube and see them working, and they just kind of kaboom, 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 like a duck with even shorter legs than a duck's got, because it's a big footprint, and it sticks to the microtubule. And that's in every cell, in every human thing, every living thing. And again, the pieces of this aren't found anywhere else. Now the protein is, got lots of proteins, but that little kinesin is not found anywhere else. It's one part. It's a one-part thing. It either is or it ain't. You can't make it from something else. And there are no predecessor things like it anywhere that science has ever seen. So it just appears on the scene, and it's critical to moving things around in your cell. Without it, you die. It's all or nothing. Your life depends on these little buggers. Makes you feel kind of vulnerable. Every cell has a bunch of them. They move along the microtubule filaments, powered by something called ATP, and they walk in one direction. And when they're done, if they got to go back, the microtubule will disassemble and reassemble in the other direction, so it's always going from negative to positive. And it transports cargo such as proteins or whatever else. It's like a little fork truck. Only it grabs on and then just walks. Now, it doesn't have very far to go, and it gets there very quickly. When you see animations of it, it's very slow. But you got to realize the distance is within a cell. Okay? So that's just a taste of how special cells are. There's 100 other processes going on, especially cell division, that are essential to life. And it's all precision. It's all, most of which is things that don't exist outside of the cell. And there's no predecessor things anywhere else in the fossil record or in simpler life forms, if you can get simpler than a one-cell thing. But all of this stuff has to be there and exactly as it needs to be at exactly the same time. All of it has to be there at the same time. And if anything's late to the party, the cell dies. If those little kinesins are late to the party, the cell dies. If whatever made the protein is late to the party, or doesn't function, the cell dies. It's life or death for everything in the cell. That's pretty awesome. And that's how special we are made. And like I said, some very brainy scientists, more so than anybody in this room, have studied the cell for 100 years, and they still don't understand all of it. Most of the stuff is in the last 30, 40 years. All these ATPs and the kinesis. We didn't have microscopes. The electron microscope was created in our lifetime, I think in the 50s or 60s. You probably remember it. It hadn't always existed. Without the electron microscope, we wouldn't know any of this stuff. So we're in that precise window of time that we have the technology and we have the cumulative scientific research and exploration and equipment that we can now see what God has created and understand some of it. We see His power, His creativity, His divine nature from the things that we now are able to understand, whereas 100 years ago they couldn't. That's pretty amazing. We are in a very privileged situation. There's two books. One's called The Privileged Planet, and the other's called The Improbable Planet, because whoever came out first, the other guy had to change the title. But they both deal with all of this cosmos and the laws of physics and this kind of stuff as to how privileged the planet is and how privileged we are to be here now. And how all of this is so precisely organized and has been so precisely sequenced. If you go through the 6 days of creation, everything's in a sequence, and we've got the sea creatures, and we've got the land creatures, and then we've got mankind. Well, in the fossil records, we've got all of those bugs and little trilobites and all those little things, thousands of life forms that came upon the scene all at once in what's called the Cambrian explosion. And since then we've had the birds and the reptiles and the mammals and man. And that's exactly a sequence. And in the fossil records, it's exactly that sequence. The oldest known things are these little things that ran around in the sea, kind of almost microscopic stuff, but very simple things. Some of them look like horseshoe crabs, if you've ever seen all that stuff. Just thousands of little itty-bitty life forms and snails and worms and all this kind of elementary life that was in the sea. And then it progressed as God, the next day, the next day, the next day, and man. There have been no new life forms since man. I never thought of that when I read it. Since whenever scientists think man showed up on the earth, there are no life forms that are newer anywhere. Period. Some scientists think we've been here 400,000 years, 200,000 years, 100,000 years, whatever the particular scientist believes. There have been no new life forms since man was created. And why is that? On the sixth day, on the seventh day, God did what? He rested. What did he do just before he rested? He created man and woman. And he's done. And there's no life forms after us. Which all of this sequencing, we can argue about how long each day took or whatever, but the sequence in the fossil records and in geology and all that is exactly the same as in Genesis 1. Nice coincidence, isn't it? Okay, moving along. We're going to talk about information. We could go for 100 years and show you the design of the cell. I just showed you a couple things that really caught my attention because they're mechanical and they're so cool. your fire might be lit by other things themselves, but it's all designed and one of a kind, all has to be there all at the same time. Now we're going to move into information. And before we do that, I want to kind of go over, there's different kinds of information. We probably haven't thought about this, but when we go through it, it'll be obvious. There's random information where it's just numbers, letters, symbols, whatever, in a random form. Kind of like if you just sit down and typewriter and start wrapping it up. You're going to get a bunch of recognizable symbols, but it won't do anything. It won't say a word. This thing about taking an infinite number of monkeys on an infinite number of typewriters for an infinite length of time, and you'll get Shakespeare, that's a load of hooey. It ain't going to happen. You're going to get garbage all the time. The next layer up in information is their simple patterns. Like you'll see two T's, or TTAA, or 1-1, or some symbol that's repeated in a repeated pattern. Okay? Well, now we're starting to have some organization to our information. Right? The third level is you might have a complex pattern where it's not just one symbol, it's more than one symbol, but they're organized in a block, and that block repeats. Like 1, 2, 3, ABC, or ABC 1, 2, 3. A block of 6, a block of 6, a block of 6, a block of 6, where you see this pattern, even though it is an it communicates nothing to the reader, but you can see there's a higher level of organization and intentionality. And the key thing here, we're getting to higher levels of intentionality. And then we can get to simple communication, like a word. Okay? Now, if I took a sentence and scrambled the words, it would mean you recognize each word, but it wouldn't communicate anything. Right? And I thought about doing that, but it takes another slide, and I was too lazy. Okay. The highest form of information communicates with the expectation of a response. So it not only presents things you recognize, like words, it puts them into an order that you have to process. And then there's a response needed. Now, if you're just reading a book, there's no response other than retaining, but the highest level of communication is active. You got passive where you're just reading a book. It's still a high level of communication because it's telling you a message. But the next highest level is where it's interactive, where I'm communicating with you and you know I expect a response. That's called conversation. Right, guys? You're supposed to respond. And it's, when your wife's talking, you're supposed to respond. Okay, that's the highest level of communication. Us guys don't get there very often, do we? Okay. An example. Can you tell there's two different meanings here? What's different? A comma. So order is very important, not only to the letters to make words and the words to make a sentence, but even a little comma. What's the first one say? Now what's that mean? Time to eat. Grandpa, come eat with us. What's the other one mean? Grandpa's dinner. It's, what's that, Sweet Tomatoes movie, or what was it? Fried green tomatoes, where somebody was boiled out back and came there. So, this is high-level information. And information is going to be very important. In fact, it is the most important thing in the human body, is information. Now, hopefully, you didn't know that when you got here, and if nothing else, you're going to learn that the most important thing in your body is information. Is a computer code in every cell. And without it, there's no life anywhere. Okay? This is the DNA. Everybody's seen that picture, right? If you take a ladder with all the steps on it and you twist it, that's the DNA. The only real thing that's not right here is these steps on the ladder do not touch. It's not one continuous. There's a gap in each one of them. They don't touch. Okay? And these cross pieces, which these steps are called bases, and there's 4 of them. And there's letters. I forgot the letters. A, B, G, and F. Huh?
ATCG.
A, E, C, T, G. That sounds pretty close. I couldn't argue with you. Okay? Every cell in every living human being has this. Now, how many cross pieces, steps, do you think are in this chain that's inside the cell? That's a, the little thing in this cell that's as big as this room, it's really, really tiny. But how many cross pieces do you think there are? Connectors or bases? Let's take a guess. It's a big one.
20 million.
Huh?
20 million.
20 million. Try 3 billion. Every DNA chain in our body, and I believe in every living thing, has approximately 3 billion connectors. That's a lot. Okay? Just keep that one. So you can look at it, and each connector is a pair of these 4 bases. A, T, C, G, G, A, whatever. Okay? You've got 4 of them. Now the key thing is each pair, and of course pairs repeat, because you only got 4 of them, you got 3 billion connectors. But the key is, yes, they repeat, but they are in a precise sequence. The first one is this pair, the second one is that pair, this 2 billionth one is this pair, and the 2 billion and 1 connector is another pair, and sometimes it's AC and sometimes it's CA. When you flip them, you get a whole new thing. Okay? There's 3 billion of them, and it is exactly precise the sequence that they're in. It's like a computer code. In fact, Bill Gates, once he was explaining what DNA is, he said, that's more exotic and complex than any computer code Microsoft has ever written. That's a quote from Bill Gates. A guy named, I think, Stephen Meyer explained this to him, and Bill Gates was blown away. He said, that's beyond anything humankind has ever done in the realm of computers and writing computer code. And the key is, if you do mess one of those up and you flip it or you move it, you've got a deformity. You've got a mutation. And we'll get into mutations in a little bit. Do you know you share 25% of your DNA with a daisy? With a flower? Does that make you a flower your ancestor? We share 1.5% with chimpanzees. And all of a sudden, they're our ancestors. And they share 25% with a daisy also. There are certain energy-using functions, energy processing, whether your energy comes from sunlight or ribeye or broccoli. I had to say that for Kathy. She can't get near me. It's still processing. So the processing of energy is very similar across all life forms. So that's why we have 25% of our DNA. There's blocks of our DNA that matches blocks of the DNA of a daisy. And of these 3 billion, we've got blocks. 25% of these 3 billion are in blocks in sequences that match a daisy. So when somebody says we've descended from apes, say, oh, no, you're real wrong. We've really descended from a daisy. You give us way too much credit. And especially the guy you're talking to. He's the one that descended from a daisy. Okay? Initially, and this is part of the scientific catch-up, this 1.5% of our DNA is the high-functioning part of our DNA. So scientists thought the other 98.5%, they called it junk DNA. I'm sure God was pleased with that title. You know? Well, we have since found out that junk DNA is more like an operating system that tells the computer what to do with input. You got information coming in, and then you've got instructions as what to do with it. Well, the other 98.5% is largely the instructions, and the 1.5% is the code, the information. And as we learn more about DNA wasn't discovered even what it was first discovered what it would look like, and then we found out it did look like that. That was 1957. Anybody here not alive in 1957? Showing off, huh? Look at me. I didn't expect to get your hands out of that. Anyway, except for these babies here.
58.
Oh, fairly missed it. Big event. DNA, 1957. Watson and Crick. All right, moving on. What's that look like? Yeah. Now, this is a protein. It's what a protein looks like. A protein is a series, a sequence of amino acids connected by something called lipids. Okay? And some of the shortest strings to make a protein are like maybe 20, 25. Some of the longest strings are several hundred amino acids. Average is about 150. And we're going to use that as far as information. If you have just consider each of those little blocks or whatever an amino acid. There's 20 amino acids. And there's left-handed, this is what they call them. There's left-handed amino acids, and there's right-handed amino acids. And the only ones that this protein can use is right-handed. And the connectors, there's left-handed and right-handed of those, too. So if you want to build a protein, you've got 40 different amino acids to choose from, and you've got 2 different connectors to connect, just like a string. If you just considered that they were just connected to one another and wasn't a string going through, like you could pop them apart. That's what a protein looks like. Now, just like the DNA, if you're going to make a protein that does a specific thing, you have to arrange these 40 proteins and these 2 connectors in exactly the right sequence. And you may not use all 40 proteins. You may use some of them a lot, but you have to have them in exactly the right sequence. And they have to be connected by the right one of 2 connectors. And there's 150 locations on this string. Some of you are figuring out that's pretty hard to do. So in every string you've got 40 choices, and in between every string you've got 2 choices. You do the math, and it's I forgot the exponent. 10 to the 195th power chance of that happening randomly for just 150 locations. And again, some some really complex proteins that do really critical things can be several hundred connector locations. So the chance of this happening randomly for even a simple protein, and you've got, I don't know how many proteins you have, the different proteins we have in our body, but just for one protein, the chance of that happening randomly, if you had all the parts available at the same time, and you just kept mixing and mixing and mixing, and nothing else came in and nothing else went out, so that your stockpile changed. If you kept the same stockpile and you kept building it over and over and over and over, it would take 10 to the 195th power before randomness would guarantee you got it right. That's 10 with 195 zeros. And just for frame of reference, you know what an electron is, and a proton, and a neutron. That used to be the smallest elements we knew about. Now there's quarks and neurons, and there's about 20 different subparticles smaller than electrons, neutrons, and protons. But when I went to school, when you went to school, those are the three things spinning around in the atom. Okay? If you took all of those, every neutron, every proton, and all the electrons, and some atoms have a bunch of electrons. Uranium has 212 of them. If you took all of that in the entire universe, every star, every moon, every planet, every particle of dust, every particle of gas, in the entire universe, you come up with 10 to the 8 number of elementary particles. Now, I don't know who sat down and counted those, but that's going to be a boring job. And I don't know what kind of grand assumptions that guy made, but I've seen that in several different books. That's the going number, 10 to the 8. Well, to get one protein right by random chance, it's 10 to the 195th. And every time you add a 0, you multiply the previous number by 10. So if you have twice as many numbers in your exponent, it's not twice as big. It's billions and billions and billions times bigger. So random chance cannot do that the way your body does it routinely, thousands of times every instant. Every cell you've got is making proteins. They're the building block of our bodies. And every cell is doing it exactly right when the chances of doing it randomly are 0. Somehow, the cell does it, and it's all from DNA. The DNA's got the instructions as to how to put that protein together, and how to put that protein together, and how to put that protein together. And you need to be an eye. This cell needs to be an eye cell, and this cell needs to be a blood vessel cell, and this cell needs to be a toenail cell, and all the different varieties of cells are instructed from one DNA string of 3 billion bytes of information. Without that information, nothing happens. Now, if you have a computer and you want it to do something it doesn't now do, like you want it to show you maps, you've got no maps on it, and you want it to show you maps so you can figure out driving distances and all that, what do you have to do? You got to download an app. What's an app? It's a computer program that when you put in information, it processes the information and gives you back a picture, and maybe a route, and maybe a distance, and maybe a time, and maybe directions, turn left, turn right, go straight, stop, whatever. You have to add information to your computer. You just can't say, give me a map. It's going to sit there and do nothing. So you not only have to add information to your computer, then you have to input different information than you've ever inputted in your computer before. Right? Well, life is the same way. In order to get a different cell that does a different thing, you've got to have different information. In order to go from a cat to a camel, you've got to change the DNA code. You've got to change the information on this 3 billion part location computer code. And where's that new information come from? That's the big question. And you get anybody talking to you about evolution, just say, where's the information? Kind of like the old thing, where's the beef? Burger King? Where's the information come from? And they're going to go, what information? And you're going to go, you don't know enough for me to talk to you about this. And you need to learn a little bit more before you talk. That wouldn't be a Christian, but it's really what has to go on. You need to be a little more aggressive than that. But that's basically the thing. If they're not talking information, they're not discussing the real issue. The real issue of life, and not just life, but first life, is information. Where did the information come from? And that is one of the most telling evidences of intelligent design is the input of information. There is nothing anywhere that has information that did not have a designer. You do not have a computer code without a computer programmer. You do not have a computer without a computer designer and a builder. You don't have anything without a designer and a builder. And even your car now won't run without information. You've got that old 1940 Jeep, right? It'll run with no information. It don't need information, right? It's got no computer. Well, Seth, you got a fairly new truck. What happens if your computer goes out? It's expensive yard ornament. It's yard art. Everything needs information. And your body and your cells and everything else we have needs information. Okay, one more. Okay, this, I've already kind of done this. The probability thing that we talked about, if you've got a bike lock with 4 dials on it, and it locked your refrigerator, and you had to get your refrigerator open, what would you do? Huh? Sledgehammer, pickaxe. If you didn't want to destroy your refrigerator, or take the hinges off one side and just open it that way, what would you do? You start 0, 0, 0, 0, and then you go 0, 0, 0, 1, and and however fast you could change them, you'd have to go through 10,000 combinations. That's 10 to the 4th power. If you've got a bike lock with 150 locations, like that simple protein, that's the random process. Has to start with all zeros, and then you put 1 on the right hand side, then you put a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 5 and that, and then you put a 1 in the next space, and then you run through it, and then you put 1 in the next space, and you run through both, and you just got to do that. And there hasn't been enough time, even if you think the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, for this process to generate the first protein. And that's something that really amazed me. There isn't enough time. They call that probability material. There isn't enough time for this random process, even if you had everything in the primordial soup that everybody says we had, for it to try enough different combinations. Not to speak of the fact that it's in a polluted environment, and there's all kinds of other stuff floating around that's going to get in the way. Not thinking about the fact that as you're halfway through putting this together, part of it degrades to 0 because things don't stay unless they're inert. But anything that's active, it's going to decay quickly. And sometimes before you got this 3 billion string going, or the 150 connections for a protein, by the time you got the 150th one together randomly, the first 30 of them have decayed to nothing. And if it's a random process, you don't know what those first 30 were. You got to start all over because you got no memory. So even if you had the right one and you're going with these 150 and you're down to 149 and you got to put one more amino acid in there and you've got the exact right amino acid with the exact right connector and you're about to plug it in and the first 30 disappear because they decay, you don't know what that sequence was because random processes have no memory. We don't have enough time. There has not been enough time to create the first molecule, much less the first DNA chain, in 4.5 billion years. If it took a few seconds for each combination, there's not been enough. There's only been 10 to the 16 seconds since the beginning of the Big Bang. That sounds like a pretty small number compared to everything else we've been talking about, but it's true. Even if you say there's 13.6 billion years, that's only 10 to the 16th number of seconds. And we've got 10 to the 195th possible combinations for one protein. So what are the chances of that happening by random process? Does anybody know how to spell zero? I mean, it's zero. You just think about that. There's only been 10 to the 16 seconds, and you've got to try for one protein, 10 to the 195th different options, and then you've got to build thousands of proteins and trillions of cells that have, 100 things in each cell. You got to get all that together before you got life. There just hadn't been enough time. I never thought of that until I read it, but there just hasn't been enough time. Okay? Okay. In summary, for this part, hopefully you can see, and we haven't gone through everything in the cell, that each cell had to have been intentionally created all at once. And for life to be, all the cells had to be created for any life form that had more than one cell. All of those different cells had to be created all at once at the same time. Even if you've got a little microscopic bug that runs around in the ocean back in the Cambrian age, and it's got 3 body parts, the cells for each of those 3 body parts has to have been existent at the exact same time, simultaneously, for that organism to be alive, to exist, and to replicate. And when you get complex forms like, anything that's not an amoeba type thing in the ocean, you get a regular fish, or you get a worm, or you get a horseshoe crab, or anything like that. And then you get into big fish, and then you get into reptiles and birds and land mammals, and then humans. There's just no way for that. And each and every one has to have different information than the other one. And when you get to higher life forms, it's got to have much more information than earlier life forms. And then each life form of a similar complexity has to have a whole different code, a whole different 3 billion sequence, have the same amino acids and the same connectors, but the sequence is totally different because the instructions are totally different. Would you like to have a neck like a giraffe? No. Or would you like your skin to look like a zebra? No. Well, the DNA code tells its neck to be like it is with, I think, 7 or 8 vertebrae is all they got. They're like this big. Or the little horns. Would you all like to have those little stubby joggers they have on their head? Well, that's DNA instructions. It tells those cells to be there and to develop into that piece of that animal. And it's all from information. Information always implies a designer. It's required. There are no circumstances where you have information of any complexity, much less this complexity, and you don't have a designer. It's impossible. Any questions so far? That took a lot longer than I thought. You guys are listening slowly. Any questions? Okay, we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and move on into a little bit about Darwinism. I'm going to give you some ammunition. You've heard a lot of it already, and then we'll get into some of the philosophical approach to the intelligent designer. All right? So if you want to go to the bathroom, get water, coffee, or whatever, or if you just want to sit there and have your brain explode, you can do that too. I want to do a little bit about Darwinism, which is the basis of evolution. And to start out, Darwin would not have written his book today if he were here today. He would not have written it at all. Wouldn't even started it. Because his basic assumption is by now we would have found transition species. It's been 150 years. Remember last year they had Darwin Day, I think it's 150th anniversary, or maybe that's this year, but anyway, it's right at 150 years. And we've dug up a lot of the earth looking for stuff. There's archaeology going on all over the place. And we have not found one. So by now he would have given up. Okay? And he readily recognized that his theory could not, did not, would not explain the Cambrian explosion. And I'll go into that for just a minute. We have, the geologists have layers of earth, and you got the Jurassic period, you've all heard of that. Well, there's a period called the Cambrian period, which is about 4 layers down from today. Now, there's a lot of debate and a lot of rational arguments that these layers don't represent what geologists think they represent as far as time. But generally, the deeper it is, the older it is. How old is up for great debate, and how quickly these layers were laid down. And in some areas, the layers are inverted, and one that's supposed to be 6th is 3rd, and what's supposed to be 5th is 6th, and they're all mixed up. They're not uniform in their sequence. But if you just say, okay, generally speaking, we have these layers, and there's different fossils in each layer. And how they date the layers is by what fossils are in it. They say this animal lived 150 million years ago, and it's in this layer, so this layer must be 150 million years old. The funny part about it is how do they date the animal? Well, they date the animal by what layer it's in. I'm not kidding. That animal is 150 million years old because it's in the layer that's 150 million years old. Well, I just said they date the layer by the animal. And they date the animal by the layer. So somebody just said, I think that's 150 million years old. So a lot of this dating stuff is pure conjecture. It's artificial. But if we say something that's deeper is older, and something that's deeper than that is older, that's a pretty reasonable thing to say. Kind of like the ruins in Jerusalem. You got, as you go deeper, you find older communities all over Israel. They just built a new city on top of the old rubble of the old one. Well, that kind of makes sense with just general deposits of dirt. So anyway, this Cambrian layer is probably 5th or 6th on the chain. And there's several layers below it. There's probably as many layers below it as there are above it. Below it, there are no fossils of any kind. Now, none is a pretty specific number. 0 is a different number is different from all other numbers. In fact, most numbering systems didn't have 0. They had 1 through 9 of whatever symbols. 0 is a fairly recent concept in humanity. And it's a very special number. Any other number is a number, and it's very similar to the number before or after it. 6 is pretty close to 7 and 8. 0, there's nothing close to 0. It's absolute nothing. There are no fossil records below the Cambrian period. So there can't be any ancestral stuff, because there's nothing. You can't have ancestors when it's empty. The Cambrian explosion, well, first let me do, Kathy's ahead of me telling me where I ought to be talking about. This is Darwin. Down in the middle is a little stem next to something looks like a raccoon or a badger. And then you've got all these branches and all of these different and more complex life forms as you go out from the central trunk and as you go up. And that's really a depiction. Now, his handwritten tree was about 1/10 as big as that. It was very simple little design, and we have expanded it into that. And that's what you were taught in high school, and that's what your grandkids are taught even today. That's what they teach in college. That's what they teach at Harvard or anywhere. That's the picture they use. That exact picture. Okay? Leave it there for a minute. So anyway, this Cambrian explosion has literally thousands upon thousands of life forms. Again, a lot of them are microscopic. Some of them are very simple. Some of them are very small. They're all they were aquatic. The earth, the sea was teeming with life. Remember that from Genesis 1. It says, and the sea or oceans was teeming with life. Okay? And it was. But the problem is, all of this life that was teeming had the same birth. Geologically, the Cambrian period is 10 million years out of 4.6 billion. The people who use that time scale say it's 10 million years. That's 2/100ths it's 0.002 of the entire time span from 0 to 4.6 billion years. 10 billion is 0.002. That's the shortness of time that this period existed in secular geology. That's a blink of an eye. 2/1000ths of the total time that geologists think has existed from the creation of the Earth to now, 4.6 billion years. That Cambrian period is 2/1000ths of that time. Yet everything we see, or not everything we see now, but thousands of life forms sprang into existence and died and became extinct very soon thereafter in that one little 2/1000ths of the time that has existed according to secular geologists. No ancestors. Wasn't enough. We talked about time. There has not been enough time since the beginning of time to randomly make one good functioning molecule. And here, all of these life forms sprang into existence in 2/1000ths of the time available. So really, the tree looks like this. Next slide. Boom. That's a forest, but graphically, that's the tree of life in the Cambrian epoch time period. Thousands thousands of trees with no ancestor sprang up from zero, ground zero, literally, and boom, off we went. And there was no ancestral during that period. Everything came up, everything made its own kind. Does that sound familiar? And that's all they did. The tree got tall. It didn't make a different kind of tree. It made roots and made its own kind of tree through roots. You know how Melaleuca and Brazilian peppers do? They just create forests of their own kind. Well, that's what happened. That's what it is. Huh?
What about that fence?
I know where you live, mister. I did not notice that. I was focusing on the tree. So this is really what the fossil record shows. Not that previous thing. Everything that came in that act of creation. First there was everything, and then there was the sea creatures, and then there was the land creatures, and then there was the earth. And I'm going to digress for a minute. You remember the phrase, and there was evening and morning, and it was the sixth day. How many days of creation were there? 7. The Bible does not say evening and day for the seventh day. The seventh day has an ending. Now that's a little bit goofy, but that's what you've got this pattern 6 times. It says evening and morning, and that was the first day, evening, morning, second day, evening, morning, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, seventh day, no evening and morning. So there's a pattern set up by God. When He sets the pattern up, you pay attention to it, and when the pattern quits, you could pay attention to that. But I've heard somebody, their conclusion is, we're in the 7th day, and we're still going on, and He has one more act of creation. The day isn't over because He's not done creating. What's the next level of, what's the next event of creation? New Jerusalem, who have a new earth. That made a lot of sense to me. It's not far out doctrine or anything. It seems to make sense. Anyway, that was free. No trouble. All of this stuff created all at once. It created more of its own kind, and then went away. I think there's been like 5 mass extinctions in the history of life, however long it's been, and like 90-some% of all the life forms that have ever existed are extinct. Some big number like that. Has anybody else heard that, read it? No? It's true. There's more extinct life forms than there are current alive life forms. I've seen it more than once. The estimation is there's 10 to the 40th power different life forms have existed since the beginning of life. That's a lot. 10 to 40 zeros. And there ain't that many, you know, there's a lot of different kind of insects and bugs and stuff like that. I don't know if there's millions of life forms existing now. So yeah, there's been a lot more life forms that have existed, a lot more than currently exist, and almost all of them have died out. But we're still here. And after us, there'll be the cockroach. Okay. Darwin can explain survival of species. There are changes in species. There's foxes that live in Spain that have medium coats. There's foxes that live in the Arctic that have really dense coats. There's a certain kind of bird in the Galapagos that has a certain size beak. And you find that same bird in Ecuador, which is 150 miles away, in a rainforest, and they've got a different beak. Bird's the same, it's got a different beak. Fox is the same, it's got a different coat. There are what you could call evolution for survival but there's nothing for a rival. Hopefully you can remember that. I mean, that's not, I'm hard of that. Darwin can explain survival changes to be a better of whatever it is, or to exist in different environments. But the structure in the DNA is the same. We can breed dogs to look like anything we want, but it's still a dog. It's a Labradoodle or Labradoodle or Labradachsen or something. Huh? I mean, there's a whole bunch of those. Well, we breed anything we want. You can have a custom tailored dog, vanity dog. That's not evolution, as Darwin implied. That's just slight changes in the cosmetics of the kind, either because man did it. Well, if man does it, you got a designer. Oops. If it happens naturally, it's a small adaptation to better survive in that environment or a different environment. But it has nothing to do with what we call first life, the arrival of life. Darwinism does nothing with that. And he even said, I got no answer for that. This primordial soup stuff is not Darwin. And if you think about the probability of trying to put together a molecule, they can't do it in a pristine, sterile laboratory with all of the necessary ingredients in pure form, and they mix it together in the right conditions. They can't get it done, much less in some mud puddle 4 billion years ago. I don't know how they expect that to happen, especially when things decay. Everything decays, and by the time you get it together, half of it's already decayed. We've gone through that. So Darwinism does not work, and it does not explain the Cambrian explosion, and he wrote in his book, The Origin of Species, that I can't explain the Cambrian explosion because they knew about it, and I can't do anything with it. And he said there will be transition species, and 150 years later, there's not. And nothing in his book deals with first life. Okay? Now, on to philosophy. Again, we're not dealing with evidence. Hopefully, with the cosmology, the physics, and the biology, there is no question that everything has had an intentional, intelligent designer that transcends the universe, that's beyond time, matter, space, and energy, and had a personal, specific objective, and that objective for all of this was Lee and John. Oh, and Seth. And each of us. That's the whole reason all of this is here. Okay? What choices did this intelligent designer have? He could have done nothing, right? The Trinity could have just kept motoring along with the angels and the seraphims and the cherubims and the mosquitobites and whatever else. And could have done nothing. Or he could have created a universe with no moral code, no right or wrong. So everything would have been okay. I personally would not want to be. Our society is getting close to that, where morals are relevant, and whatever I think morals are fine. Even if my morals impinge upon your ability to breathe, or my value system. Okay? Or you could have created a universe with moral code but without free will. How much fun would that have been? Or the only other choice is to create what he did. And the reason that is his choice is because there is no love when there's no universe. there's no love when there's no moral code. And there's no love when there's no free will. And what's the sign on McGregor say about God? God is love. John says that 4 times in his 3 books. God is love. It is the ultimate virtue. It is the nature of the intelligent designer. So you would not be surprised if he designed it in a way that would be the ultimate virtue. The highest standard of behavior and motivation would be what he is. And without that, a materialist world does not have love, because there is no moral code. Because the only place you can have a moral code is from a moral code giver. If you have evil, you are making a moral judgment, and therefore you also have good, which is another moral judgment, which means you have a moral code, which means that code came from somewhere. Morality doesn't come from within us because we all have different codes if left to ourselves. The only way we all have the same code if it comes from outside the civilization, outside of humanity. And that's where our moral code comes from, is from the intelligent designer whose principal moral attribute is love. And the materialists and the atheists, there's no reason for them to say the word love, because love implies a moral code, and if you don't have an intelligent designer, you don't have a moral code. Okay? Moving on. This is another philosophical argument for an intelligent designer. There's 3 main propositions. Everything and anything that has a beginning has a cause. Very similar to everything that looks like it's designed has a designer. Well, this is a little bit the flip side of that. Everything that had a beginning has a cause. Something caused it to begin. Okay, second is, we now know the universe is not eternal and timeless. Probably ruined that for everybody. Okay? So the universe had a beginning. Well, if those 2 statements are true, the third one has to be true. That there had to be a cause for the universe. An uncaused cause that's outside of what has been caused, which is the universe. So this is just a verbal argument for a designer that transcends what has been designed. From what we know about fine-tuning, microbiology, cosmology, everything we talked about, the uncaused source must be transcendent, not subject to space-time, matter, and energy, must be incredibly intelligent and powerful, and impersonal, because the objective of everything was humanity. If that was not true, we could not say it was a personal designer. That is one of the most important attributes of the evidence for intelligent design, is all of this design was personal. Because there's some religions and some people who believe, yes, there's a God, he set everything up and then he's gone. I can't find him, he's not in my life, I haven't seen evidence of his behavior or his activity, and he must have set everything up, got all these laws of nature cooking, and he's off doing something else. The absentee God. Well, that's not true. Because everything was designed for humanity. And the reason is he wants a relationship with what he designed. Okay, next philosophical approach. Truth. What did Jesus say he was? I am the truth. So what is truth? What are the attributes of something to be labeled truth, which the Bible says it is. And it says it is, and Jesus is, and the Father is truth. Okay? So it's important to figure out what qualifies as truth. Truth must be logically consistent. Some of the stuff we've heard in the news lately is not logically consistent. It doesn't make sense, some of the stuff we hear on the news, right? Has anybody not heard something that makes no sense on TV? It must be verifiable as to its claims about creation, science, and history. Now, other than Islam and Judaism and Christianity, all of the other religions, and there's thousands of them, a lot of them different flavors of one another, all of them that have a deity at all, the deity is part of the creation. And the description of creation usually doesn't match the geological record, as the first Genesis 1 does, or the geological record matches Genesis 1. But you cannot have a deity that has spoken truth to you that's part of creation. Because by definition, you can't create yourself. You can't be part of what you created. The deity has to be outside of creation for it even be eligible to be truth. So right away, talking about creation, most, except for the three major religions, as far as a proper scientific or logical definition of truth, they fall out immediately. Because they can't be true. Plus, their science is wacky, and they don't have much in the way of history, and what history they do have usually isn't exactly accurate. There is no predictive, there's no foretelling, there's no prophetic verbiage in any of those. Except maybe, who's the guy that died in Russia that they bring out every once in a while? He's on TV every once in a while. They resurrect him because he made all his predictions. Anyway. The last thing is what it does, what truth is, has to be experientially relevant to the human condition. Because by definition, we are the pinnacle of creation. So it has to match our experiential realities about the human condition. Man is sinful. If you start out with man is not sinful, you don't have any truth in anything you're going to say. If you say man is by nature good, the rest of what you say, whatever it is and whatever topic you're talking about, if it relates to the basic assumption man is good, you're in the weeds. Because man is not good. The Bible is logically consistent. It was written by 40-some people, authors, over 1,500 years, and it is completely harmonious. Absolutely, completely harmonious. It had one author through 15 writers over 1,500 years. And it's all logically consistent. It is empirically accurate about its description of creation and the geological record. Its science is correct. And I've got a page about Scripture in the back, Scriptures about creation, when it says God is stretching the universe in 4 or 5 different places, we found out that's true. The universe is stretching. We didn't know that until 4 years ago. The universe is expanding. And if you go to the Greek, it means expanding. But they didn't know what that meant, so they said stretching. Because, okay, I understand what stretching is, but I don't understand how expansion relates to the heavens. So almost all the Bibles have stretching. But the real word in original Hebrew is expanding. It's closer to expanding. That the earth is round is in Scripture. And there's There's 100 different scientific principles that are in Scripture. We've just found out in the last maybe 200 years that it ain't flat. You know, that it's not the center of the universe. There's all kinds of other things. Why some of the dietary laws are the way they were given the way they were. Why it said don't do this and don't do that. Well, we found out there's scientific reason not to do those because it's dangerous to your health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and it must be experienced and grown up to the human condition. The Bible accurately describes the human condition, unlike any other holy writing. Down to 18. About the heart, about the mind, about our motives, about how we deal our sinfulness. Everything about the human condition is accurately described. Why? Because the designer created it. And he knows exactly how it works. Okay, next philosophical. A worldview must answer the four following areas. How did I get here? How did we get here? How did anything get here? Your worldview must answer that in harmony with what we know to be true. I would say it came from another universe. Well, there's no indication that that's true. So your worldview falls apart. What is the meaning of life? Materialism says life has no meaning. We're just a bunch of atoms and energy, and when we're gone, we're gone. So if life has meaning, materialism doesn't work. What's morality in its source? We talked about that a little bit ago, about evil and good. Morality has to have a moral giver, because it doesn't come from within us, because we have 6 billion different moral codes. Okay? And destiny. What's the end of man? We're going to get recycled as a cow? How many people want to do that? Or a cow? You don't have cows. Some people might want a chicken. They got lots of chickens. Kathy would want to be a dachshund. She loves dachshunds because they got attitude. Does Christianity deal with origins? Does Scripture deal with origins? Does Scripture deal with the meaning and value of life? You are fearfully and wonderfully made, and all your days have been ordained before the first one, before the doctor slapped you on the rear end. And hundreds and hundreds of others. Knows every hair on your head. You are the apple of his eye. Okay? Morality at its source. The Bible's full of moral code. In fact, some people think that's all it is. And they don't want anything to do with it. And destiny. What's the Bible say about destiny? Okay, there is eternity. And there's 2 destinations. There is eternity because this being is eternal. He transcends time. And if he created you in his image, you're going to transcend time too. And he says there's 2 places you can end up. And the choice is yours. We can either say, thy will be done, and thou art need, or he will say, your will be done. To each individual that doesn't bow in, their will is going to be done. They chose, they wanted it, they got it. Okay? So that's another philosophical. Each of these slides is on 1 sheet of paper as a handout, just so you can remember. We have another 4 more issues for a worldview that have to be dealt with to be a coherent and consistent worldview. You have to provide for the existence of evil. There's a lot of people who don't think evil exists in humanity. They're letting criminals out of jail all the time. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of areas of thought or philosophies that say mankind is basically good. Evil is circumstantial or environmental, nurturing deficiencies, whatever, but there's no true evil. A worldview has to account for justice. Is there accountability or is there not? Has to, and this is important, has to provide for the existence of love. We know love exists. Everybody here has experienced love and received it and given it. Even people with pets know what love is. Just watch Dr. Cole or Dr. D or Dr. T or Mid-America Vets or any of that. I mean, people spend thousands of dollars on their pets and they go nuts when their pets are sick. I mean, they become unglued. Forgiveness, that's another important one. Where's forgiveness in your worldview? Or do you have it? If you have forgiveness, you have the need to forgive. If you don't have a need to forgive because there is no right or wrong, then you don't need forgiveness. And all of these four essential elements of a worldview that have to be accounted for converge into one location at one point in time called the cross, crucifixion of the Son of God. And the guy was talking about it, I'm writing notes. Oh, this is cool, this is cool, this is actually cool. You know, you got this, got that. And then he finished off with that freedom. Oh my goodness. It all came together. All of the elements of worldview wrapped up in Christ. Okay? Next one. The God of the Bible itself, Christianity, is the only deity, holy book, and worldview that provides for a creation that allows for love, meets the requirements for truth, and adequately deals with the major issues of life or a worldview and the human condition. It is the only one on the face of the earth that satisfies these philosophical questions and requirements of truth. So, the point of this whole thing last 2 weeks ago and now is not to change your faith. Your faith is based on your relationship and your experience with God over the years since you were saved. What I hope it does is give you a solid foundation, one of boldness, to talk about the existence of God and who He says He is, and the elements of your own worldview, that there is a destiny for every human being because the Creator is eternal, so is the Creator in His image. And if nothing else, I hope you are more confident in defending your faith and being able to present to an interested, unchurched person. Now, some people who are unchurched won't give you the time of day. They've got their mind made up, and you're not going to change it. And the Bible says, don't argue with a fool. You're wasting your time. But if somebody's a bit of a seeker, but they're struggling with the existence of God, you don't have to remember all these facts and figures, but if you got the outline that it's 10 to the 100 something chance of this happening by itself, then you can go through at least parts of the pieces of galaxies and the sun and whatever, and these philosophical arguments. You can create in that person the belief or the understanding, awareness, and the conviction that there is a designer. And that designer, based on these philosophical arguments, is Yahweh. Now, you don't use that word. God the Father does exist, and His fingerprints are all over everything. And you go back to Romans 1:20. Men are without excuse, because His fingerprints are everywhere. The precision and the intentionality and the purpose of everything is so evident that there is an intelligent Creator, and that Creator is the God of the Bible. And And hopefully that, because a lot of people, you can't start quoting the Bible to them because they don't believe, and it's awful. And it's really hard to quote them, all have fallen short of the glory of God when they don't believe the Bible. So some people, sometimes you got to get them first into the point that the Creator is the God of the Bible. And there was a creation, and there was an intentionality, and there was design, and there was purpose, and that person you're talking to is the purpose. And hopefully that if he's, if they're rational and objective and are willing to listen and respond to new information, this might be the information that gets them in the doorway so you can then talk about Scripture. There's a lot of people who are skeptical, but they're not locked into an opposing viewpoint. And I was hoping we'd get some people out of the community here for that very purpose, is to bring them into awareness that all the evidence points to an intelligent designer that is the God of the Christian Bible. Okay? Any questions? Oh, good. One.
60 seconds, Steve. Does the Quran go into creation at all?
Yes.
It does.
To my knowledge, I haven't read it. But to my knowledge, it does.
I thought it started with Muhammad.
No. He had the revelation and was raptured off the rock that's now in the mosque on the Holy Mountain, the Temple Mount. But no, they go all the way back to Abraham. They believe in Abraham also.
Oh, correct. Back in creation.
It's my understanding, I've heard people say that it does have creation, but I don't know how accurate it is. But I don't have personal knowledge that their holy writing have accounts for creation, but I think it does. Anything else?
I don't think it describes creation, I think it just assumes creation.
Yeah.
But they don't believe in that mankind is sinful. That's a very difficult thing to,
As far as Islam,
yes.
no, I'm not that familiar. I know it wants them to kill me, I know that much.
There's a really good
Because I'm-
book by LaBelle, it's called No God But One.
Yes.
And it will go through a lot, it does go through a lot of what they believe and compares it to what Christianity believes and shows how Islam is insufficient in their belief. It was written by a fellow who's now in heaven.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming, especially those that made it twice. Those that made it once, not so much.
Oh, no.
Thank you, Dan, for the invite.
Oh, you're welcome. Again, I hope this. I was hoping this would open the door for some unchurched, but God didn't choose to bring any here. So my conclusion is it's for, there's more slides that I can get to. That it would help you in not being afraid that you're wrong. Because our culture says that science and Scripture are at odds and have enmity towards one another. And that's been taught ever since Darwin. Well, that's not true anymore. There's a huge harmony between what the Scripture describes and what we now know to be true. And many, 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 many scientists and a bunch that aren't Christian have come to the conclusion there is an intelligent designer. They won't go any further, and they certainly won't write about it because, like Nature and a couple of these big science journals, will not publish. I don't care what you write, I don't care how accurate it is, I don't care how profound it is if you mention intelligent design or reference somebody else who's a proponent of intelligent design, they will not print it. I've read that by intelligent design proponents. They cannot get rid of it in the 3 big scientific journals. And they just won't consider it. And if you sneak it through the peer review and get it to the final editor, and he finds out you know somebody that is an ID person, he'll squash it. And I've seen a couple of instances where people had that happen to them, authors. So, this harmony between Scripture and what we know to be true is totally foreign to most people in the culture. And if you can just break that myth and get them to understand there's not acrimony or enmity between what science and what Scripture says, you can make a big step towards them considering God and the gospel. But until you do that, there's a lot of people who won't even give their time of day. And that's what this is designed to do, is give you a logical, loving, not in your face, rational, calm presentation that you can do to get them past the myth that science and Christianity are as far apart as you can get, the east from the west, because they're not. Okay? Let's close it. Question?
Well, I was going to say, there's a book out by Lee Strobel. It's called The Case for the Creator. And he was an atheist, atheist reporter, and he set about to disprove God, and ended up becoming a Christian because he went with all the scientific evidence and found out he was a creator. And if you ever saw the movie God's Not Dead 2, he was on they get us there and on the witness stand talking about it.
There's another book called Darwin's Doubt, written by a guy named Stephen Meyer, who wrote Signature in the Cell, which is 400 pages of microbiology. And I burned my brain cells out reading that letter. A guy named Hugh Ross is an old Earth person, but he's an incredibly brilliant astronomer and has written lots of books on science and Scripture that are very, very good. He just happens to believe it was like 23 years old, but he acknowledges that there's a valid argument for the younger people. But the rest of his explanation of science and harmony with Scripture is amazing. So there's lots and lots of good books, lots and lots of wonderful videos, animations about biology, the philosophical approach. Rabbi Zacharias does a lot of that. R.C. Sproul does a lot of that. And all kinds of other stuff about different aspects of Darwinism and creation. There's just an enormous amount of information and presentations of this on YouTube and in print. So we are not without resources, which 30 years ago I would not have said, because we didn't know all the science that people had written about. Anything else? Let's pray. Father, it's just beyond our ability to think or imagine how all this came together instantaneously, everything being exactly as it had to be from the very instant, the first nanosecond of creation. All of these laws had to work, had to balance, had to harmonize. And how intricate, when you say we are fearfully and wonderfully made, it's beyond our, we only get a small taste of what that really means as we study life and its complexity, and irreducible complexity that it has. And we have a renewed, more real appreciation for what we're dealing with in Cuba. And I just thank you for the people who have put these resources together, for the ability to learn this, for what you have going on in the culture with both Christian and non-Christian scientists who are probing the depths and increasing the boundaries of our understanding, our knowledge, and all of it points to you and your divine nature. We just thank you for making it so obvious to those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. We pray that you'll bear this in our hearts. It is there, that we will trust you to bring it out in times when we need it. It's not something we're going to be tested on a piece of paper, but you have promised that in the times that we have, you'll give us the words to speak, and you'll give us how to speak it for the listeners that we're dealing with. We pray that you give us opportunities to bring the harmony of Scripture and science together for those who truly are struggling with that. We ask this in the name of your Son and for his glory. Amen.